The Last of Us Season 2 Episode 6 is an episode I think we all knew was coming, and it's an episode I was really excited for, and yet, having seen it now, I think this is a bit of a weird one. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot to love, and that's what we're going to discuss first, but equally, the more you think about this episode, the more it doesn't quite fit together, and leaves Season 2 in a very strange, precarious position as we head into the final episode. So we're going to discuss that now. By we, I mean me, obviously, I'm sitting here alone. The best you can do is write in the comments. Hopefully you do. Let's begin. It's worth starting this by saying we did need flashback scenes with Joel. I think we need moments like this to, one, hit us hard again with the grief, remind us what Ellie has lost, what Joel means, but also make it clear what Ellie's been struggling with. Not that any of that is a surprise. As someone who hasn't played the second game, I said all of this stuff about Ellie in my previous episodes anyway, that Ellie is a child burdened with so much survivor's guilt about the loss of Riley, of Tess, Henry, Sam, very little knowledge of her parents, someone who felt she was meant to die with Riley and is conscious of all these other people that died along her journey, where being immune, she's told, will help create a cure to save humanity. All these good people died and I survived, but there's a reason for that, there's a purpose, I can make it mean something. And then Joel strips that purpose from her and she is left reeling for whatever the hell her life is now. What can it mean? What value does she have to keep living in place of all of these other people who are condemned? When she tells Joel he's selfish for saving her, she's not exactly wrong. It's not the full perspective, but it's also kind of true. How is she supposed to feel her life is more important than saving everyone else's? And okay, I think we know a cure was never really on the cards. Season 1 made that perfectly clear, but they don't know that. This is how it feels for her. So, what followed? An Ellie who was furious with Joel but never really knew how to voice it because she was scared to find the truth, so her anger came out in all of these other rebellious, reckless ways, alongside this constant pressure to prove she can do some good, to put herself first in all things and all risks in a way that is warped into this idealized vision of being like Curtis and Viper. And then this motivation, to some extent, for Ellie to die, to not be the survivor. The struggle to believe her life can have clear purpose, but maybe her death can. It's a difficult feeling to grapple with, that one, and perhaps had she been given time to repair things with Joel, she might have become focused on building a life, the kind Dina then is providing her an avenue for. But now Joel is gone, and that's what she gives herself to, revenge, or the argument of justice. That can be her purpose. And if she dies in the pursuit, kind of so be it. And I mean that both literally dying, or let's call it the death of her soul. I think all of that stuff was fairly clear in the subtext, but it probably needed emphasizing nonetheless. I think we did need a scene between Ellie and Joel on the porch to confirm how Ellie found out the truth. Otherwise, the moment at the end of episode 5 where she just says, "I know," feels a bit jarring. We also needed to see her reaction, for her to express her feelings, and to know that she wanted to try and seek repair. The very night before Joel died, that's quite obviously the tragedy here. There was hope for them to fix things, only then it was broken. Secondly, I think we needed to see Joel's perspective as well, actually. Not to understand why he did what he did at Salt Lake, because that was already clear by the end of season 1, but to understand how he feels about it now, how he lives with that fact. I think the opening scene with his dad is great for that. Joel tries to tell a lie in order to protect Tommy. Not only that, but Joel will accept all punishment and pain. He will put that upon himself in order to protect someone else. I think there's a splitting mechanism going on here. I will bear the consequences, or carry the guilt, or be burdened with the horrible truth in order to spare someone other than me. Someone better, someone good who can be innocent and saved. I will absorb the darkness in order that they can shine with the light. So it's not just that Joel doesn't want to be hated by Ellie for what he's done. I mean, naturally that will be a part of it, but on the surface, it's the idea that he wants to spare her the pain of discovering the truth, the guilt that would then leave her with. Instead, let her live some consequence-free, perfect childhood that was never going to be possible. That's part of the sadness of all of these rosy scenes, isn't it? The idea it's built upon some dreamlike shifting sands. Just like he wants to spare Gale the ugly truth. Is that for his own sake, so so Gale doesn't hate him, or is it also for hers? It's hard to define exactly where the motivation ends and the justification starts. I like Joel's arc this episode of essentially learning to release the truth, and interestingly, unlike his dad, Joel isn't really making excuses for his behaviour here. I like Ellie's arc here of finding courage to confront him and even admit it to herself. I think there is a purpose behind the story we are given this episode, and I think if you look at it in isolation, it does come together quite well. However, was all of this necessary?
Got something for me? My grandkids are gonna love these.
Oh, you better believe it's World Anvil. They are sponsoring this video, they are offering you 51% off, and they are an online tool for building worlds, you may have guessed. But also creating characters, designing and managing campaigns for all sorts of different games. My best friend uses it for D&D, but there's lots of other games. You can use it for planning your stories, writing your stories, working on all sorts of creative projects. For me, it is my novel. I need a tool like this, otherwise I am far too chaotic. We're moving flat soon and I literally have 6 cardboard boxes full of random sheets of A4 paper I've written old ideas on. Pre-World Anviled me was a nightmare. So with something like this, not only can I keep everything organised, keep it all in one place, be able to easily edit things, but I can create timelines, I can create hyperlinks branching off specific characters or articles, or a billion other things that just make it so much easier to find stuff. Planning things can be hard, especially when there's so much to do, but having all of these tools to help visualize it, to help split everything down into specific points, articles one at a time, it helps immensely. I'm not going to show you because it's a secret, but I've created different bio pages for all of the characters in my world, even the minor ones, which house they live in, what their job is, who they're friends with, who they hate, what different beliefs they have or opinions about events that go on in a book, or whatever. So, World Anvil is great. I hope you can hear my passion, and if you desire, if you crave. If you call to the heavens for a 51% discount, then use the code TREE, or click the link in the description, or the pinned comment, or if you just want to try out the free version, then go for that. You know, there's no time limit on it. Test it out for as long as you want. World Anvil. Okay, I didn't actually mention the things I loved. All of the scenes we're given here are great. I think they're beautifully acted by both Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. The shot of Ellie with the space helmet is beautiful. So is watching Joel fix up the guitar. I enjoy how nervously he sings. I like seeing him realise what the moths mean and going, oh. Speaking as a therapist, I will say dreams do carry a lot of meaning. I think that's true, but it's not often this clear-cut checklist of this symbol means this specific thing, where you just look up dream meaning sites and that's it. No, it's a lot more complex than that. I made a video about dreams years ago, but I still like how they use this idea here. All of these moments are fun and very sweet and moving, and I even like framing the whole episode around each of Ellie's birthdays. I think that's a good touch, but again, is this stuff essential? Does it progress the story here? Could we have cut a lot of this down, or else find a way to give it more structural meaning? Because a lot of these scenes are things we have already inferred. Ellie burned her arm so she could wear short sleeves. Joel gave this guitar as a present. Ellie moved into the garage to find more space. Ellie had a fling with Kat. Ellie even already basically knew about Salt Lake before she confronted Joel. We're largely already aware of this stuff, so what do we gain by having these moments spelt out for us? The porch scene does it for a clear and important reason, but I'm not sure about everything else. And for me, actually, the most disappointing one is Gale and Eugene. Again, in isolation, I love what we see of them this episode. I think they're well-crafted scenes. Joel's lie about Eugene forces Ellie to confront the truth about Salt Lake, so that works for the arc within this episode. There's a good thematic idea about the difficulties of sharing truth. Plus, this has been a mystery from episode 1 onwards that we've wondered about. What is the deal with Eugene's death? What does this stuff mean? Now we learn what it means, and I think, well, how does this matter going forwards? Does it matter? You know, the point of going back in time to explore backstory isn't just to neatly tie up certain questions with obvious explanations. It's to inform you of something that will have greater significance on the events going ahead. All of this build-up we've had about Eugene and all of Gale's character, how is any of that going to mean anything for the present-day Ellie in episode 7? And it's interesting, but when you can't link it to the present events, it does make this whole episode feel quite wayward, I think. After all the praise I gave for the structure and the pacing of the last episode, I don't think this is the case with this one. I think it ends up feeling a bit lost and losing some of its momentum because it's not clear why any of this is really that significant. With one episode left, are we even going to get a conclusion to Gale as a character? Is there an arc to begin with? Arguably episode 1 showed us her end point of an arc, then she's just sort of there, almost learning the truth about Ellie's immunity, and it makes you feel a faint tension for what will happen if she does find out the truth, but I'm no longer sure that really matters anymore. I struggle to see how her character is going to be concluded within this season if there's only one episode left. I hope I'm wrong, but I do worry. And to make a similar point, I think we get interesting context this episode that better explains how Ellie was behaving in episode 1 and 2. Stuff I think a lot of people seemingly didn't understand back then when there were all of these complaints about Ellie just being annoying and too childish. This episode provides a lot of context to explain that stuff, but why now? Why in episode 6 when we're past the point of the audience needing to understand how Ellie was in episode 1? Arguably, even the fact we learn Ellie was on the cusp of a journey to repair things with Joel right before he was killed. Why learn that now, right before the final episode, after she's begun this whole revenge quest that this motivation is supposed to inform? Isn't this too late to be learning about it? And I don't know how episode 7 is going to look. Maybe they've got a great idea to link this all together. However, it's still not quite as straightforward as that. Let me explain further. So arguably, yeah, I think you could be having this episode 6 take place earlier in the season. Maybe having this as episode 3 would be one decent candidate, you know, right after Joel's death. So that not only is his death already very painful for Ellie, but we also get added context behind it, added tragedy. We then fully understand her revenge quest that would follow in what would then be episode 4. That could work, and if you wanted a slow flashback episode to take a breath, I think after the madness of episode 2 is probably the best place for that. Although ordering the series this way doesn't then leave much in the way of reveals for later down the line. Plus, I think many of the criticisms from gamers would then make a lot more sense when they say Ellie isn't angry enough in the show. Because I think to not only see her pain at Joel's death, and to then be lumped with added context for the pain before we then pick up again with her heading out on this revenge quest, I think it would then be quite jarring and kill a lot of momentum to see her behaving not so angry, but instead in this half-numbed manner, where she's been stuck for 3 months in hospital and she's trying to convince herself this is a rationally motivated quest about justice rather than blind revenge. I think ordering it that way would kill a lot of momentum. Arguably, instead then, you could split up all of these flashbacks. Not have it as a standalone episode, but disperse them across other episodes, as I'm told is sort of what happens in the game, but I really don't think that would work for a TV medium for so many reasons. The structure of a TV episode is just very different. It is better to have a whole contained story in the past and then give it a real clear purpose at the end that is significant for the future. So why episode 6? It's because Ellie was never supposed to begin this quest lost to her rage. This is meant to be a development that has to stretch across the entire season and possibly some of season 3 as well. You need more character development in a show than a game requires, so we have to see her progress from a more ordinary-ish start point towards a greater end point. Hence, they did force Ellie to be stuck in hospital for 3 months in order that her initial rage can freeze into something colder. And we then had an episode all about Ellie trying to justify her quest as doing something good, and then we had her trying to treat it all a bit like a fun adventure, to not grapple with the reality of her pain here too much, to try and focus instead on romance, but then it starts to seep in more, and we get to the point she's attacking Nora in a very similar way to how Abby attacked Joel. So we get to that scene and think, oh crikey, Ellie is getting dark, and then we go back in time to be reminded why she might turn to those extremes before returning again, I presume, in episode 7. I think that makes sense. Also, there's arguably the interpretation here about this being the real Ellie all along, which isn't an idea I personally like for many reasons, maybe to discuss in another video, but structurally I think the idea works, where we begin this season with a very reckless Ellie not taking the reality seriously and nobody can quite rein her in because Joel is supposed to, And then Tommy is worried she's turning into the worst of Joel, and Gail suggests she's already like that under the surface, but he and Jesse don't believe it. They want to go out and prevent that. Dina wants to go with Ellie, and, you know, Ellie's not dark underneath. She's perfectly justified in what she's trying to do, and this is kind of fun. It's kind of romantic. This is just two teens getting a little over their heads who don't even really know the truth. Once they descend into the depths of hell, they will realise all of this darkness isn't for them. Ellie's rage has mostly been kept under wraps. It's not too consuming. She will confront Nora, Nora will tell her the truth about Salt Lake, and Ellie will break, realising this. She'll recognise that this path she's walking isn't her, this isn't what Ellie does, and she will turn back. Only we get to that moment and Ellie says she already knows the truth. She's always known and she doesn't care. Oh my god, Ellie is that dark. Now let's go back in time to remember why. You know, I think both of those ideas do make for an engaging build across this season. Not to say I don't have problems with it, because I do. Mainly, I think this episode just ends badly for this to hit. If the whole point was ending episode 5 at the scene with Nora, and then going back in time to explore all of Ellie's pain and how that now informs the person she's becoming in this scene, I think we need to end episode 6 returning to Nora again, to see much more of what happens here between Ellie and Nora. You know, in an episode that really lacks much subtlety at all. An episode that should be a lot more subtle in a lot of places. I think the one moment where it can be and should be quite blunt is with emphasising why all this matters for Ellie in the present tense. To cut from Ellie talking about wanting to try and forgive Joel, back into this basement where all of her rage about Joel is now exploding, us being given more time to see just how brutal she can be, I think that would make all of the slightly wayward stuff that happens in this episode feel less wayward, twice as significant. The link would be much clearer. But we don't get that. We get this shot in the storm which is meant to carry the same kind of idea, but it doesn't hit hard enough, I think, for this episode to feel fulfilling. As a result, I think this episode is an interesting one in isolation, but ultimately feels like it's killed all of the pace and momentum at an odd time in the story, for reasons that don't quite deliver anyway. I've broadly been pretty positive about Season 2. I think many of the criticisms out there are flawed ones, and there is still a lot to love about this season. However, not every episode is out yet. The season still needs to end strong for that to be true. And for the first time, I'm starting to worry if this season is going to end strong. This episode is a 6 out of 10 for me. Very, very enjoyable and very sweet. In a way, more enjoyable and more sweet than all the other episodes, but not altogether very significant. Weirdly, way less significant than the Bill and Frank episode or the Ellie and Riley ones when you think about it. Instead, this feels more like something very indulgent rather than developing television. But I think I might be in a minority for this one, so let me know what you think. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, maybe even support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Orr, Michael Gallagher, Benry, Joshua C. Follier, and Chad Bramwell. Thank you.